Hello and welcome to CVR News Network. You're watching CVR English, and these are the details of the world 360 with me, Sandeep. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has accused the United States of mounting an unprecedented military threat, alleging that 8 U.S. warships armed with 1,200 missiles and submarines are targeting Venezuela. He described the deployment as an absolutely criminal, bloody threat and greatest danger that continent has faced in 100 years. The U.S. has confirmed a naval presence in the South Caribbean as a part of an anti-drug trafficking operation, but denies any intent to invade. Maduro warned of full military readiness and vowed to defend Venezuela, while also criticizing the breakdown of diplomatic channels with Washington. White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro has issued a dramatic warning, declaring that the fate of the United States rests with the Supreme Court as it prepares to rule a legality of President Trump's sweeping tariffs imposed under 1977 Emergency Powers Law. A lower court recently deemed most of the Trump's tariff illegal, prompting an appeal. Navarro called the case the single most important economic case even before the court, stressing that if the ruling stands, it could dismantle Trump's trade strategy and severely impact national security and economic stability. The tariffs remain in effect until at least October 14th.
This case is arguably the single most important economic case that has ever come before the Supreme Court. If the lower court's ruling is upheld, President Trump has correctly said that will be the end of the United States. I think we're in very good shape. Bottom line is we're optimistic that the Supreme Court will rule on this. We don't have to, the tariffs will remain in place at least to October and perhaps beyond until the Supreme Court rules on this. This case is arguably the single most important economic case that has ever come before the Supreme Court. If the lower court's ruling is upheld, President Trump has correctly said that will be the end of the United States. I think we're in very good shape. Bottom line is we're optimistic that the Supreme Court will rule on this. We don't have to, the tariffs will remain in place at least to October and perhaps beyond until the Supreme Court rules on this.
A plane carrying European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen experienced GPS jamming while approaching Plovdiv Airport in Bulgaria on August 31, 2025. EU spokesperson Ariana Podesta confirmed the incident, attributing it to suspected Russian interface. The aircraft at Dassault Falcon 900LX were forced to rely on manual navigation and paper maps to land safely. Von der Leyen was on a 4-day tour of EU nations bordering Russia and Belarus, aimed at reinforcing European defense and solidarity. Bulgarian authorities reported a disruption of satellite signals and suspecting deliberate jamming. The Kremlin has denied involvement, but EU officials say the incident underscores growing threats from electronic warfare and the urgency of bolstering Europe's defense capabilities.
We'd confirm that there was GPS jamming, but the plane landed safely in Bulgaria. We have received information from the Bulgarian authorities that they suspect that this was due to blatant interference by Russia. We are, of course, aware and used to somehow to the threats and intimidations that are a regular component of Russia's hostile behavior. Of course, this will only reinforce even further our unshakable commitment to ramp up defense capabilities, and so we can indeed.
The International Association of Genocide Scholars (IAGS), a leading academic body with 500 members, passed a resolution stating that Israel's sanctions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide under Article 2 of 1948 UN Genocide Convention. The resolution, backed by 80% of the voting members, cites deliberate attacks on civilians, starvation, denial of humanitarian aid, and forced displacement as evidence. It calls on Israel to immediately cease all acts constituting genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Israel has strongly denied the accusations, calling them part of the misinformation campaign, while continuing to face a genocide case at the International Court of Justice.
Aspects of international law, there isn't just a blanket right to self-defense. But that self-defense has to be carried out in a proportionate manner, and it also has to be shown to be something carried out from military necessity, neither of which are demonstrated anymore by Israel's actions on the ground in Gaza.
In Gaza, September no longer signals the start of a new academic year. It marks another chapter of survival. Israeli bombardment has devastated the education system, with nearly 90% of the schools damaged or destroyed. Over 660,000 children have been deprived of schooling for a third consecutive year. Many school buildings now serve as overcrowded shelters, while others lie in rubble. Despite the destruction, Palestinian teachers are conducting classes in tents, determined to preserve learning and hope. The war education has become a war on identity, with children facing trauma, displacement, and the loss of their dreams.
Her family were displaced to western Gaza. All she managed to hang on to was an old stationery set. On Monday, she lined up with other students for the first time in nearly 2 years. Not in a school, but in a tent.
My mother registered us at this camp. It is a good chance for us to get education, because almost all of the schools and houses have been leveled by the Israelis.
The principal says teachers are determined to give classes, but many students arrive with nothing because their homes were bombed and their families can't afford to replace what they lost.
Before the war, our students used to go to school wearing their new school uniforms with school bags and notebooks. Now, they don't have uniforms, bags or anything because people don't have money to buy them and there are no stationery stores.
These children are the lucky ones. Hundreds of thousands of others aren't going to school.
So many students can't come to school because they live very far away and there is no transport to bring them. And also because of the ongoing displacement from place to place. The whole situation is very difficult and very tough.
An entire generation is trapped between rubble and despair. their classrooms replaced by when 10-year-old Lamadib and her family were displaced to western Gaza, all she managed to hang on to was an old stationery set. On Monday, she lined up with other students for the first time in nearly 2 years. Not in a school, but in a tent.
On Labor Day, tens of thousands of protesters rallied across all 50 US states under banner Workers Over Billionaires, demanding sweeping reforms to protect working-class Americans. Over 1,000 demonstrators were organized by labor unions and activist groups targeting policies of the Trump administration and corporate elites. Protesters called for stronger labor protections, universal health care, fully funded education and affordable housing, and an end to corporate corruption and systematic attacks on marginalized communities. Major cities like New York and Chicago saw large turnout with symbolic marches near Trump Tower and speeches denouncing economic inequality and federal overreach. Security has been ramped up at Brazil Supreme Court in Brasilia as the verdict phase begins in former President Jair Bolsonaro's high-stakes coup trial. Bolsonaro, under house arrest, faces charges including conspiracy to overturn the 2022 election, inciting riots, and leading an armed criminal organization. The trial, led by Justice Cristiano Zanin, has drawn global attention, with US President Donald Trump denouncing it as a witch hunt and imposing tariffs on Brazil. Police patrols have intensified around Bolsonaro's residence and inspections of vehicles have been ordered to prevent escape. The verdict, expected by September 12, could result in a sentence exceeding 40 years, marking a historic moment in Brazil's democratic accountability. Nepal has officially banned solo expeditions on Mount Everest and all other peaks above 8,000 meters. The new regulation mandates that climbers must be accompanied by certified guides or altitude workers, aiming to improve safety, reduce fatalities, and enhance rescue operations. The move also boosts local employment for Sherpas and guides and introduces stricter environmental rules. Permit fees have been significantly increased, with Everest spring season cost rising from $11,000 to $15,000 per climber. This marks a major shift in Nepal's mountaineering policy to ensure accountability and sustainability. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, 81, was seriously injured in a car crash in New Hampshire on August 30, 2025. He was a passenger in a rented Ford Bronco when it was struck from behind by a Honda HR-V driven by a 19-year-old woman. The collision sent both vehicles into a highway median, leaving them heavily damaged. Giuliani sustained a fractured thoracic vertebra, multiple lacerations and injuries to his left arm and leg. His spokesperson confirmed he is in a good spirit and recovering well, and authorities stated that crash was not a targeted attack. Violent clashes broke out across major Australian cities including Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane during a March for Australia anti-immigration rallies on August 31, 2025. Thousands of protesters, many linked to far-right and neo-Nazi groups, demanded an end to mass migration, with rhetoric targeting Indian immigrants. In particular, counter-protesters from refugee and anti-fascist groups confronted them, leading to police intervention using pepper spray and riot squads. The Australian government condemned the rallies as racist and divisive, reaffirming its commitment to multiculturalism and social harmony. At least 6 arrests were reported in Melbourne. Israel has intensified its military operations in Gaza, targeting Gaza City and Jabalia refugee camp, with over 40 Palestinians killed since Saturday. The area has been declared a dangerous combat zone, halting aid and deliveries and worsening humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump reportedly considered a controversial post-war plan called the Great Trust, which proposes US administration of Gaza for a decade and financial incentives for Palestinians to voluntarily relocate. The plan includes $5,000 cash, rent subsidies and food aid, aiming to rebuild Gaza as a tech and tourism hub. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has signed an executive order blocking city police from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement, directly challenging President Donald Trump's plan to deploy federal officers in the city. Johnson condemned the move as unconstitutional, politically motivated, stating, "I don't take orders from the federal government. The federal surge, expected to begin September 5th and last 30 days, is a part of a broader push to expand law enforcement presence in democratic-led cities." Johnson's actions have sparked a fierce political clash, with Trump accusing Illinois leaders of failing to control crime and threatening further intervention. The standoff highlights deep divisions over immigration policy and federal authority.
Receive credible reports that we have days, not weeks, before our city sees some type of militarized activity by the federal government. It is unclear at this time what that will look like exactly. We may see militarized immigration enforcement. We may also see National Guard troops. We may even see active duty military and armed vehicles in our streets. He is reckless and out of control. He is the biggest threat to our democracy that we've experienced in the history of our country.
The 82nd Venezuelan Festival turned into a stage for global activism as thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched near the red carpet, chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." The waving banners reading "Stop Genocide and Free Palestine," organized by groups like Venice for Palestine. The protest aimed to spotlight the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and Israel's military offensive security was tightened around the festival, with police cordons and body scanners deployed to manage crowds. The absence of Israeli actress Gal Gadot, whose film premiered at the event, was noted amid calls from activists to boycott artists perceived as supporting Israel actions. Pakistan's Punjab province is facing one of its worst flood disasters in decades, with over 1.5 million people affected across 2,038 villages due to overflowing rivers, Ravi, Sutlej and Chenab. Torrential monsoon rains and dam releases from upstream have triggered widespread devastation, displacing nearly 5 lakh people and killing at least 30. Relief operations are underway, with hundreds of camps and thousands of rescue personnel deployed. Officials warn that the situation remains critical as floodwaters continue to rise, threatening more communities and straining emergency resources. That's the end of the bulletin. Keep watching CVR News English.